second hour of the month of the Let's Talk Business with Sherryl Cusseaux, where we get all up in your medical business. I am the co-host, Dr. Shanae Davis, owner of Your Best You Personalized Primary and Diabetes Specialty Care. Sherryl has a schedule conflict today, so I get to sit in the big chair. Today is March the 8th, an International Women's Day. And we have three amazing women that are going to come on and share information about how they impact our world, impact our region, and impact Black women on this International Women's Day. But first, I must share with you, if you've been with us for the past 4 years, this is our 4-year anniversary right now, you know that we generally highlight Colon Cancer Awareness Month on the first show, the second hour in March. This is because African Americans are more impacted by colon cancer. The incidence in our community is greater, the mortality rate in our community is greater, and it could be positively impacted. That means we can die less. We will know earlier about our condition for less invasive treatment or treatment overall if we just go to get screened. We sincerely appreciate the sponsorship of Moffitt Cancer Center to help us to get the word out to our community. So we'll become, again, more aware just by tuning into this show and also connecting with great healthcare providers, great mental health providers, great community advocates like our guests that we're having on today. So I want to also give a shout out to the ladies that we have on board right now. Hello, Miss Tina Fernandez. Hello, Jessica Love. How are you?
I am very well today. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And I am wonderful as well. I really appreciate the invite. I'm excited to be here.
Wonderful. So I first want to introduce you, Jessica. Jessica is a licensed clinical social worker and certified grief professional with training in relationship psychology and trauma. She is the owner of Conscious Body Therapy, a specialty practice for encouraging and assisting others with healing and discovering their authentic health. Jessica's inspiration for conscious body therapy was developed from her own personal journey of healing, which led her to her defined purpose to assist others. Her holistic approach incorporates handmade plant-based body products, sound therapy, meditation, and talk therapy to explore, release, and heal from deeply rooted experiences that unconsciously show up in life. So that is a wonderful segue into the beginning of our questions here, and also what you'll discuss with us. As we know, as Black women, women of minority backgrounds altogether, but particularly Black women, we shoulder a lot what's going on in our family, what goes on in the community, and what goes on in our places of work. So giving of ourselves without regard for self-care needs oftentimes result in difficulties and changes in our own health that we don't address. So Jessica Love, tell us a little bit more about what you see in some of the clients that come to you with some of these heavy complaints or burdens, and how do you work to help us through those issues?
Yes, that's actually a great question and very relevant to what's going on in the society today. I also have a full-time job working at the local university. So there I see a much different population than I do in my private practice. So in my private practice, I see predominantly people of color. And what I've noticed about self-care is it really goes back to we really have to buy into something. So we can run around here and say self-care, and it becomes a cliche term at some point if people don't really buy into it. And when I sit down and talk to clients, I begin to understand that it's a little bit deeper than that. It is a series of patterns that start and that form together all the way from childhood. So, and in childhood, from ages birth to 5, did your parents incorporate that in your life then? And then even after that, when you go through grade school and then you go through college, it's like that is something that was never even an option. And so sometimes when things aren't an option, we struggle with giving ourselves permission to really focus in on us, because we were always taught to share in our community is because of the lack of thereof. So we really got to lift our brother and our sisters up. And so I think that's a struggle with our people being able to really invest in their own self-care. I think some people, what I work with, have mentioned aspects of feeling guilty, immediately feeling selfish, feeling difficulty telling people no. Some of us are overgivers, and that is we know historically where that can come from, is like, as I stated earlier. But it really boils down to them just buying into it. And a lot of them have a really hard time with that, only because they don't have a practice of having those boundaries to where their time and their energy and who they are really does matter.
Boundaries, that's really important, and giving ourselves permission to say no. So you also mentioned about lifting one another up in our community. You actually have to disclose in some degree, verbally or non-verbally, that you need lifting. How have you shared with the clients that you see ways to lift one another, and how have you encouraged disclosure of the things that burden us?
Most importantly, I really do encourage, and I'm gonna say the cliche word I just said earlier, which is self-care, right? I really encourage you lifting others up by taking care of yourself, because you do yourself complete harm if you are giving from an empty cup, because at some point then you start to possibly could feel resentful. You may feel as though someone is not doing the same to you that you are giving, you're not receiving the same thing. A lot of those feelings come up, so then we start to give out an obligation, and that doesn't feel good. So, and then it creates possible tension between whoever is the receiver on the other end. So first, really check in with yourself to analyze, do I have enough to give in this moment? And what can I give? And that I'm okay with, even if I don't get anything back. That is the very first thing I usually help clients to understand if they don't, about giving. And then after that, you give where you can. And usually we give in ways that we are more experienced in. So someone may call me and say, oh my gosh, I just had one of my friends or family, I really just need to talk to you for a minute. That is a way of me giving. I'm not charging you for this session. We could talk on this phone for a good hour or two. And that's my way of giving my time and my space and my energy. Someone else may be able to give someone some money, loan someone something, some type of financial resource. Sometimes it's, I can watch your children for you while you go to work or while you go out of town for the weekend. It's so many different ways of providing transportation, sharing meals with families. We come together on certain days and we all eat together. So that time together is also giving your space in your home and things to people. So it's many different ways that we kind of show up to give that we don't always necessarily think about in a way of us giving, because it's so natural. It's been normalized to do those things, but you are still giving.
You said those things so eloquently. I want to actually bring in Tina Fernandez to speak to that as well. Tina Fernandez, a wonderful woman. She has an MBA, Master's of Business Administration, and currently leads multicultural marketing, an agency called Community Health Marketing. Her career spans over 30 years in healthcare, and it focuses on marketing, strategic communications, product management, product development, marketing development, and so much more. She takes what is visualized and makes it real through sound strategic balance of marketing effectiveness and strategic impact. She is a respected voice for people of color, a credible voice in product portfolio growth, and earns a seat at the table wherever she serves. Her leadership and service and accomplishments include founding the 1113 Foundation in 2021, and also membership in Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Welcome, Tina Fernandez. Now, just to tie you into what Jessica has expressed, I want to talk about giving first. Giving is a way of actually releasing of the burdens on yourself. That feeling of give is cyclical or can be cyclical when you get into a space where you're able to receive just by making someone else feel less burden in the sense of taking something off their plate, less burden in the financial situation and in a financial situation, less burden by showing them to do how to do something that you know how to do. So giving of time, talent, and treasure is something that we as members of our sorority see and do all the time. Can you speak to some of these variables that Jessica has put on the table from a marketing research perspective and other that you have to add from what you give to our community through Delta?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm going to take a personal point of privilege first and speak to it from a personal perspective, because I was just having this conversation with myself this morning. From a personal perspective, when you're giving of yourself, you have to make sure you give authentically, right? Because you can't give and expect something in return. And you have to give from a space holistically, knowing that even if you don't get anything in return, it's okay. So I'll put a pin there, because I was having that conversation with myself, because that's the only way you can be a true giver of self and know that you're giving yourself that self-care that's needed, right? Being from a giving space. From a Delta space, being a gift of giving, you know that you're serving the community. So you know the needs of the community, you're serving the community, and that's also a space of self-care, because you've made a commitment to serve. You know what the community needs, and you're giving of your time in a volunteer fashion, right? You're giving of your time and your expertise and knowing what the issues are, giving of your talents and saying, yes, I'm going to volunteer here. Yes, I'm going to volunteer there. And yes, I'm going to make sure that my voice is heard. So an impact is made. So there's betterment for my community. Now, from a marketing perspective, which was the last thing you asked me, Dr. Davis.
Yes.
I have aligned my skill set, and I know you said a lot of things about what I've done over the last 30 years, but what I'm most passionate about is the work that I do right now, because right now I believe, where I'm aligned, I'm a voice for our community. I'm a voice for our community because I am able to sit down with clinicians and sit down with people from our community that may, have a particular cancer or suffering from multiple sclerosis or even diabetes per se, and understand their journey, understand from our ears, and be able to translate what do they tell me so that it makes sense as I sit back and speak with pharmaceutical companies or speak with medical device companies, or even speak to clinicians like Dr. Davis, or maybe your family practice doctors or your oncologists, so they understand from a cultural perspective what's important to us. We show up in tribes. We come from, and y'all know this, the ginger ale era, right? We show up differently. We need to participate in things like clinical trials and register so that we are heard. But if you don't have people who look like us, who understand our culture, who have the seat at the table, as Dr. Davis said earlier, and have their voice, have their ear, and have that voice, then we can't give of ourselves in this realm to make a difference from a marketing perspective in healthcare. So I just wanted to share those three pillars of how I see myself giving, from a self-care of myself authentically, from a Delta Sigma Theta to the community, and also from the area in which I'm passionate about from marketing. So I hope I've addressed that in those three areas, Dr. Davis, for you.
You absolutely have. And thank you so much, Tina, for those wonderful points that you have made. In particular, you said that, our participation in market research is absolutely vital. And in a previous conversation that you and I had, I also emphasized that, because as research comes about and those outcomes are translated from what we call bench to bedside, in healthcare, how do you make those findings understandable to the populations that you serve? If we don't participate in clinical research, and I'm not just speaking of, diabetes research or taking medicine, those types of research. I'm also talking about what's called qualitative research, taking the experience of certain people and translating the outcomes from the experience into clinical practice. That's something very important when it comes to practices like what Jessica does for her therapeutic space there. We need to know about the experiential side of healthcare, mental, physical, social. How does the experience of others that look like us, that can experience life like we do, how do we take the variables from that research and translate it into a healthy way of practicing and directing care? You spoke of cultural, the cultural significance in providing interventions. Jessica, and also you talked about the two different spaces that you work in. I hate to say in a PWI, but in a PWI, a predominantly white university, and in the clinical space where you connect with mostly minorities. How do you reconcile those experiences as you are sharing your professional insight?
So you mean in regards to working at the PWI?
Yes, when you encounter the majority of people, the white people that don't experience life or stress the way minorities do, how does that affect your therapeutic, advisement and other women of color that you care for when they talk about their experience in the workplace, when they encounter majority race and the tension and stress that they may experience? How does your experience, affect your advisement?
So I will say this, it is a big difference. It is a big difference working at a PWI and then having a private practice and I do provide services to a lot of professional Black women. So that's predominantly my population. And so they do bring that up in sessions, the discomfort that they have with the microaggressions and many other things that they have. Many different intersectionalities are there. Not only that they're Black women, some of them are also different of the LGBTQ population and a few other things. So a lot does come up. But personally, when I work with them, I'm gonna keep going back to this. My whole goal is really to help people reach their authentic self. And there is so much freedom in discovering that. And you have to give yourself permission for that, because that is not something that we were necessarily taught when we were a child. So if anybody was familiar with Dr. Joy DeGruy, her work really with post-traumatic slave syndrome, she talks about the effects of slavery and the things that took place back then and how we had to cope and come up with different ways of communicating and interacting with each other in order to just kind of get by. And some of those very same things that was done back when it was a safety measure, we are still practicing today. And so that includes the way that we show up in spaces that don't really have us there. When we show up in white spaces, how we want to withdraw and go in within ourselves, code switch, not really vocalize our feelings or advocate for ourselves. It's like, I gotta be safe. I need this job, right? I need to be able to provide for my family. And we now see that we're in a generation where they are not doing that much anymore. They are really stepping up and advocating for themselves and saying, okay, I'm gonna turn my 2 weeks notice in, I'm out. I'm gonna go somewhere else where I'm loved, or I'm gonna start my own business so I don't have to deal with this. And I think it's beautiful to see that the work that our ancestors and all the family members and people before us have laid down to be able so we can actually get to this place. They didn't necessarily have the permission or the opportunity to do it then because it was life-threatening. And so it was a lot different. So usually when I work with them and I respond to their emotions and their experiences, it goes back to, I need you to feel what you are feeling and let's process it and let's walk through this. Let's talk about why you don't feel comfortable advocating for yourself. What does that make? How does it make you feel in the moment when you think about the things you want to say? Are you really clear about what it is that you want to say? Does it speak directly to your complaint and your concern within the workplace? Just being very clear about how they're feeling is very important. And then being able to help them have that dialogue back and forth and be able to process what could be the types of retaliations that can come through. So we kind of really go through a lot of different ways and process, how do I move through the world in this space and still be authentic? It has taken me a while to get there, but I feel like I am here and I show up who I am the same way when I'm in the room, when I am the only Black person, to when I am in the room with all Black people. I show up the same way, and this is what you're going to get. And you're gonna take it. And they love it because they keep telling me to come back. So we're gonna keep doing it.
Well, Jessica, you are empowering me just as you are speaking about being authentic to yourself, and in being authentic to yourself, your audience, albeit at work, albeit socially, they respect that. They have no choice but to expect what you express. So I can't wait to talk to you more in a social space about that. But back to what we're doing, the business of what we're doing here. Some points that Jessica raised, Tina, for example, how we show up, how we code switch, and how the younger generations of minorities have fallen, in line with this great resignation trend that particularly showed up post-COVID. So how does that affect your capacity to conduct market research, and or what have your findings been as it relates to these points?
It's a very interesting observation, right? Because those of us who are on the opposite side of the generation, right, where they have an empowered voice. They're coming with a more courageous voice than maybe what we had, who are on the opposite side of that generation. We have to really embrace it from a different mindset. Because let me speak to this first, because we could potentially look at it as a space of, ooh, you think you're entitled. But you're not entitled. You're coming from a space of a courageous voice. And we just had this conversation last week. I came off a leadership conference last week that was held in Atlanta with some collegians. So it was a very intentional conversation that we had. But so it was enlightening for me and empowering for me. But from a market perspective, when we're speaking with, let's just say, the generation that is coming out of college, and they are not at the point of really embracing, let's just say from a clinical trial perspective, right? Or let's just say, or they are from the point of embracing from a clinical trial perspective, or at least being on registry perspective, because they do understand that it is important that their voice is heard, right? Or maybe they're beginning to understand it is important that they take notice now, because at least if they're on a registry, when they do decide, right, to be enrolled in a clinical trial, that their decision now will be impacted, will make an impact on what happens 15, 20 years from now, right? As opposed to maybe 20 years ago, when we were making decisions, we were of the holistic generation, right? So we were following, maybe more so Dr. Google at that point. I don't know, maybe, I'm just saying maybe more of a holistic approach. So the decisions that are coming up at this point, we weren't involved in the registries. We weren't as much involved in the clinical trials. We were still hearing back in our minds, what grandma was saying about, Tuskegee, and just learning about, Sister Henrietta, those types of things, and the pharma companies weren't coming to our neighborhood. So there was lack of access and those types of things. So our younger generations, our collegians, those younger generations, they're like, no. We want to be heard. We want to be included. And we as a community have to make sure that we continue to, make them aware of how important their voice is, because they don't have the backseat at the table mentality as much. It is not a sense of entitlement. It is a sense, just as you said, Jessica, of I am here. I am going to be here. I have a right to be here. And if you don't treat me as if I have a right to be here, then I'm going to get here's my 2-week notice and I'm walking on out. And we need to empower that voice. So there, Dr. Davis, that's how I think we kind of pivot and empower from a sense of inclusion with market research and clinical research and being involved in registries and the like.
I think you all are just really giving us some rich dialogue today. You've mentioned a couple times indirectly, Tina, that one, our younger or your younger groups that you engage with, there is a sense of entitlement, echoing the sentiments of Jessica Love here. But in your older generations, there may be reluctance to participate because of trust issues. So as a research professional, how do you get around those trust issues, particularly in communities of people of color? How do you, implore your experience as a multicultural professional to get them to express and to participate, especially in the vein of qualitative research?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is it comes down to relationship. You have to build that relationship first. And you have very little time, because first impressions are everything, to build that relationship. So not only do you have to have a good quadrille of people around you that are going to, speak for you before you even come into the room, but you have to be able to make that connection pretty quickly with someone so that they trust you and trust what you are saying and build that relationship quickly. So by the end of the conversation, they're saying yes. Or by the end of the introduction of why they are coming to see you into the room, hearing the information that you're sharing, they're saying yes. But it comes down to relationship, comes down to reputation, comes down to relationship, because we as the people, we're going to look at you a little bit side-eye, particularly our older generation, because we don't trust too easily. But if you have a good reputation and people are speaking on your behalf, then we're going to open we will open our arms. But if we trust you, we're going to open them a whole lot wider and let you in. That's the best way I can put it. Jessica, I'm sorry, I'm passing the baton. I know we only have a few more minutes before we go to break, but.
I was just gonna say the same thing you said, which was my whole sentiments about I don't lost my train of thought just that fast. But it was echoing the same thing you were already stating. Everything you said, I completely agree with it. You're right, definitely.
Okay, and then it's just this last couple of minutes that we have here. Do you find either of you that even amongst ourselves, maybe between in a certain age demographic, or when you step into someone of a community that isn't of African American, maybe of African descent, or that is, Hispanic, do you find ever that it's necessary, just quickly, because we're going to go on to break here, that a cultural broker is a good idea?
I'll answer that quickly, not for me, because my last name is Fernandez. So I go both sides of the fence with my background being of both communities. So I'll answer that quickly.
Beautiful.
And for myself, no, it doesn't, because I go into each professional relationship as a therapist, as in a avid. My first job is, one, to engage, as she already stated, and two is to understand, listen and understand. I spend majority of my time doing that, because whether you come from the same culture or not, you grew up in a completely different household. So we don't have all the same experiences. We do have some shared ones, but I need to know who you are so I can best help you. Support
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We'll be right back with a message from Moffitt, or just a wonderful message in itself, because today is International Women's Day, and we will be right back with you. And we are back. Thank you so much for engaging in our show today, and also having Moffitt Cancer Center sponsor our amazing show. Again, this is International Women's Day, and this is National Women's History Month, but it's also Colon Cancer Awareness Month. We are of greater risk for colon cancer, so screening is the way forward to reduce your risk for mortality. We, since our commercial break, have had a wonderful woman of color and impact in our in the field of nursing. We have Michelle Rhodes Green on with us. Hello, Michelle.
Hi, Dr. Shani. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Michelle is a 10-time award-winning nurse, international speaker, healthcare writer, 8-time author, and executive coach. Michelle is the CEO of Michelle Rhodes Green Media and founder of The Color of Wellness magazine and creator of RN Enterprise. This nurse boss is known for making wellness a motivational thing. Black women turn to her for energetic ways to motivate and engage communities, for innovative thinking, and for the ability to improve populations towards positive change in business, leadership, and wellness. She serves as an opinion consultant and CEO for World Magazine, has been featured on Medium, Blackivity, entrepreneur.com, and also serves as the editor-in-chief of the Color Wellness magazine. So Michelle, you sent me a 3-line bio, but I absolutely had to do you more justice than your humility would allow. I am
That's exactly right.
I'm Dr. Shanae Davis, and I am pleased to have you on today.
Thank you, Dr. Shanae. You know, I was sitting here thinking, like, why is she reading all this? I don't need thank you. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. We have on with us Jessica Love. She is a licensed mental health counselor and also the owner and originator of Conscious Body Therapy. And as a part of that, she helps women of color, all women, but many women of color through their experience in trauma and the things that Black women take on that keep us from caring for ourselves. So we're going to engage in a conversation together, but I'd like to address you first. So you started this Color of Wellness magazine, and I've looked at it myself. And there are many Black healthcare providers, from licensed mental health professionals to nurses, to nurse practitioners, to nutritionists. Tell us about this wonderful space for women, healthcare providers, and people of color.
Wow. Well, thank you all again for having me. I'm so excited to be here, just to be in the number. But the Color Wellness was really born, I always tell people, it's born out of COVID. Prior to COVID, I was freelance writing on my own, doing some coaching as well with the nursing community. And I just felt led to do more after hearing some startling statistics. We know about those, how African Americans were affected with the pandemic. And I just felt a pull to, like, there was more than me creating my personal coaching brand. There was more outside. It was bigger than Michelle. And I totally said, okay, all right, what does that look like? So I felt led to put the education, wellness education, right in the hands of our community. So I just pivoted my love for writing into, started off as a magazine because I wanted to give it into their hands, but now we're moving into a whole, almost like a healthcare platform, because we're moving beyond the magazine. So that's what it's all about.
That's right. That's right. And I just applaud all of your efforts and all of your reach to empower us all. Just full disclosure here, I actually have used Michelle Green in looking at some of my business and the opportunities to expand. And she is just a wealth of knowledge. And I literally applaud your efforts as a nurse and someone to reach out, encourage, and mentor other professionals to lift and expand our reach to care for us specifically, but for all nurse professionals. And I appreciate that. But back to our topic, it's Women's History Month. Today is National, or actually International Women's Day. So in that vein, wet nurses, midwives, teaching, all of those are roles of historical African-American women, women of African descent as health providers, unlicensed at the time. How has that affected your journey, and how has that history affected the messaging that you do today?
That's a powerful question. I love it. Well, as I begin to think about some of the historical figures that led the foundation for us as Black nurses, there's so many, not enough, but quite a few. And some of them we know. When I think of Harriet Tubman, we know her for what she did with the slaves and leading them through the Underground Railroad into freedom. But a lot of times we don't talk about after that how she went to serve into the war and was a nurse and was highly regarded because she would help save the soldiers with this tea concoction she would make and help them heal fast. So she was just like an amazing all-around person. So I say that to say there's too many to name, but that story always sticks with me because she's just multifaceted. I'm kind of like myself. So I see that as in me being a remnant and saying, hey, how can I again help serve? And so that second part of the question, though, when you said, hey, how does it affect the messaging? It really goes back to us, embracing all that we are. And I will tell you, because of this magazine, people are saying, hey, see my mother, I see, because a lot of us have, nurses in our family. I see my mother in this, or being able to use this, or being able to apply this. I've had people and their grandparents say, we tried the recipe in your magazine. So if that makes sense, it really is permeating through into the culture to say, hey, we've done vegetables a certain way for all these years. Try this recipe and see how you like it and let us know. And I would get feedback from that. So just being able to take what we know and pivot it into a healthier space has, to me, been the biggest impact of the magazine. So that's the big version of that answer to your question.
So
High level.
Absolutely. I want to pivot into this question regarding some of the non-pharmacological approaches to healing that Jessica Love shares with us. My pivot is with a little bit of humor, though. Online just this week, I saw the strangest question. A question, a post on what white people would like to ask Black people. And there was a series of questions there. And one of the questions was, what do you put in your greens to make them taste so good? And one of the answers was the spirit of our ancestors. So exactly. So you mentioned that there was a tea concoction that Harriet Tubman used on some of the soldiers. That too was in the spirit of our ancestors, because we didn't have pharmacies to go to. We didn't have drug reps to come by and let us know about what this and that does to heal. So part of what Ms. Love does is that she uses plant-based body products, sound therapy, meditation, and talk therapy to explore, release, and help us to heal from deeply rooted experiences that affect us, that affect our ability to go forward through our day, our mind, our body, and our spirit. Tell us more about that, Jessica.
Yes, that was a great segue. I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, all of this kind of started with me starting making plant-based body products for myself. I did blood work, right, have lupus, SLE lupus. And I was on all these medications and it just didn't feel all that great. So I was like, oh no, I don't want this. I don't like this. And so I dug deep into herbalism, and I'm still a student of herbalism. That's literally what's behind me, but it's blurred so you can't see it. It's just a lot of herbs. But I found ways to incorporate by learning how to read my blood work, understanding what it is, researching it. I really felt like I had to go into these doctor's offices with a little level of knowledge. I can't just go in and expect them to just tell me everything. And when I left there going to do more research. And so it became more of a partnership with some of my physicians that I still have to this day. And it's like, okay, this is what's going on. This is how I'm feeling. This is something I looked into. Can we talk about it? And luckily, my primary is wonderful and he allows that space. And so using herbs is something that I incorporated to be free from all medications since 2018. So I'm very blessed in that measure. And I know that is not the same for everyone. Everybody's body is different. But anyway, incorporating that into body products, knowing that our skin absorbs 60% of what's on our body. So I'm looking at all these chemicals that they put in these products. I went vegan for quite a few years. And so being able to provide those products, and then it just transformed into my therapy, because the products are actually named after different aspects of therapy and ways of how you actually use them. So the handmade cold processed soaps and the body butters and the milk baths, that all speaks to self-care and how we take care of ourselves. It's a practice. As I mentioned earlier, we're not necessarily taught to take care of ourselves in this way. We are literally conditioned from the time we are born until we decide to be more intentional about where we are going in life. And so it was key for me to see what I did in my healing process to replicate it with friends and with family. And then it just took off with people like, hey, I heard you got this, or can I work with you with this? And so that's kind of how the business started. And being able to show people that if you start being more intentional in your daily practices and what you are doing, being mindful of what you put in your body, on your body, and the people that you have around you, you will see a change. You will see a change in your mental health, your physical health, your overall health. And so just getting in the driver's seat and not letting our subconscious mind full of reservoirs be able to just make decisions for us, and we have no idea why. So it was really getting a deep understanding of who I was, and then I help my clients get a deep understanding of who they are so that they can be authentic. They can learn to heal themselves. They don't have to depend on westernized society or someone that doesn't look like them to actually be honest with them and help them. Because let's just be real. We all have experienced some form of discrimination or lack of professionalism with some medical care professionals that don't necessarily look like us, because research doesn't reflect what we experience. And so they don't really know how to serve us and care for us, and sometimes they don't care. And so I want to make sure my clients know how to advocate for themselves, whether it is emotionally, mentally, physically, or psychologically. I need you to know where to go, or who to ask, or how to advocate for yourself. I hope that answered your question. I'm so sorry.
Yes, it did, thoroughly and completely. Absolutely. Jessica, you have to make sure that you give us your contact information so that when we do a rebroadcast of this show, our listeners know exactly how to find you. Well said, very thorough in answering their questions, which brings me to one of the points that you made on self advocacy when you approach, when we as people of color get into that healthcare arena, into that space, and using advocacy for ourselves, knowing a little bit about our condition when we present and how that could affect the overall healthcare experience. Michelle, in your magazine and in your advocacy to professionals, how do you encourage or speak to self-advocacy on the patient that is of color to minimize unconscious biases from the patient standpoint and from the professional standpoint?
Wow, wonderful questions. So there's a few ways that we approach that, and some of it's sporadic, I will tell you. Like, we do always have at least annually an advocacy issue talking about ways that patients should know, especially our community, what to look for, what to ask, how to be prepared for your doctor's visits, how to find a physician that you like and trust. So we do like to take the time once a year to just address the issues between patient and their providers, just so that, as nurses, that's what we do, just help you be prepared. We put a disclaimer at the front of our magazine that, we are not physicians, we are not providers. So we ask that you take what we are sharing in this education and go talk to your doctor, have these conversations. If you see something here that sparks new knowledge, go and address them. So we are hoping to be a catalyst for that, to increase the communication. I think is so important. So that's another way that we address it as well. And then lastly, as far as future plans, we do hope to continue to grow our following, our movement, which is growing, and we're moving into this digital space because we do. I actually talked to a political advisor sort of person a couple weeks ago to say, probably 2024, definitely 2025, I want to have the color wellness, at the White House. We want to take a trip and talk about social determinants of health and address the health equity, which is a part of our mission, right where we needed to go. So we need to get that language together. Who knows? I said, hey, my legacy, I would be beyond thrilled if there was some sort of bill passed that we could help, generate. So that's what we do on our side to help the communication flow.
I mean, Michelle, Jessica, you're doing such great things for our community in healthcare. I'm just so happy our listeners have gotten a chance to see you and to hear you and become more curious about how we can help ourselves and advocate for ourselves in the healthcare arena and reduce some of these disparities. So both of you mentioned a mindset, the mindfulness, putting your mind in a positive space to, improve your health for the better. Jessica spoke of this. Michelle, can you also talk about how at least some of you, if not yourself, how you have opened the door? You've touched so many nurse professionals. I know someone has said something about mindfulness or having your patients and others that you connect with, not you, but collective you, those that your magazine reaches. How is it that mindfulness is advocated?
What comes to my mind when you ask that question is definitely around the nutrition part. I make it a point that every issue has a nutrition piece and an activity piece. So there's some sort of 30-day walking plan, or did you ride your bike? And this is what's going on in the biking world. So we always make sure we address that. And then other things are lifestyle considerations, and that comes in many forms in wellness, but those two pieces. So I say that to say that the nutrition stands out. We know that nutrition is the biggest piece of our overall wellness. And I think the biggest amount of feedback is that, I am more mindful of vegetables. We talk a lot about vegetables and just, we know the power of vegetables, right? So we do talk a lot about vegetables. And I think that has been a big push for us. So I feel like it's telling me something to do something more with that. But people have written and said, gosh, I'm now more mindful of my veggie intake, more mindful. If we do talk about fruits, the sugar content in different fruits. So more mindful of that, intake as well. But then, like I said earlier, having people say that this is the first time I've tried mushrooms, and at 60 years old, like those types of things are so powerful to me because now we're helping to move the needle in the right direction. So.
I think that's amazing. So Jessica, you notice that Michelle mentioned lifestyle and nutrition in the scope of wellness, and you're vegan. You're vegan. Also, you advocate the use of herbs and non-pharmacological approaches to health and wellness. How do you get the word out about that? How do you show people? Of course, you don't tell everyone. You told us today about your history with lupus. In what ways do you advocate wellness and use of herbs and plant-based approaches to wellness? We know you do it from your bio, but how is that done?
Oh, yeah, that's a great conversation. So I was vegan. I'm not vegan anymore. I don't eat any land animals. And I only eat fish that has fins and scales. That's it. No shellfish, no none of that. So everything else is fruits and veggies. So I don't know what you call that. It's just a diet or whatever. That's all. But so I try to come from a realistic standpoint with everything. Like everything has to be realistic. Like I mentioned earlier, you have to get people to buy into change, the change that they want to see. Like I don't convince anyone to change. You come and say, I'm ready. I'm struggling. What can I do? And so to buy into it is small changes. Like I stated, it's a daily practice. When I say daily practice, that means what body butters and lotions and oils are you using? Okay, let's look at this. Look at them chemicals on the back. Did you go look that up? Go look that word up. We can't even pronounce it, right? Let's figure out what it is. Oh, it's Fix-A-Flat, right? So it's like, do we really want to put that on our bodies? And it's in a lot of common products. Like Dove is full. I don't know if I can say that. I'll go back. So the bird soap, right? The bird soap is full of chemicals and it's crazy. And it's like, it smells so good. We grew up using that, your Irish Spring. And then now you older, so you're using all the Victoria's Secrets and all the Tom Fords and everything like that. And so changing that out. Instead of spraying body sprays before you go to bed, when you go to sleep, I have a after the shower body oil. So when you're done, you put just one pipette on your hand, you rub your shoulders here and whatever other little parts that you want just for the scent, and you go to sleep. And that smell stays on you. You don't have to spray yourself down with chemicals. So it's like things that you can switch out. When it comes to diet, I don't ever try to push anybody to change their diet or anything. It's when they come and ask questions. Are you consuming dairy products? Swap it out, especially if as a woman, especially as an African-American Black woman. Dairy products are very hard on us. Our reproductive system and our hormones is not healthy at all. I had to cut that out. And I can tell a difference if I do eat, but I travel a lot. So sometimes when I travel, I'm limited to my diet. So I may consume some dairy immediately. I know it. Like, I'm like, ooh, that was not a good choice. Switch out your whole milk to almond milk, oat milk, coconut milk, right? When you're doing rice, you can do white rice and jasmine rice and quinoa and all that stuff. But if it's something that you covering up, like with collard greens or whatever else, or chili, use brown rice instead. You're going to mask some of that taste, so you can switch it up. I use a lot of herbs and seasonings. That literally is the key to any and everything. And learning how to properly cook things like mushrooms. We think we just wash them, wet them all up. Now they won't even cook right. I learned you don't. Get a napkin, wet it, wipe them off, dry, put them in a dry pan with no oil, and they cook like to perfection. So a lot of them have a very meaty texture. So just learning different ways of how you prepare certain things that you already cook, adding more herbs and seasonings, substituting regular starch noodles for maybe vegetable noodles or some other type of healthier noodle. I always just encourage substitutions. That's all. It's really pretty much what I do. Start there, because it's hard to remove things when you do not have a replacement. And I tell people time and time again, that's how we usually fail, is when we try to take something away and we like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. And like, okay, well, what's the replacement? We're going to naturally go back to what we were doing if you don't already have something in place. So I focus on just adding, right? Just add more fruits and veggies. I'm not going to tell you to stop eating this, stop eating that. Just add this for breakfast, do this for lunch, do this, have this as your snack. How does that taste? Oh, you don't like it, then work, let's go back. Let's figure out what will work. And eventually eating and consuming all those healthier options, it makes you not want anything else. I don't crave any land animals at all. And now, because it's like, I found other options that taste good and they're going to make my body feel good. So that's pretty much how I try to help encourage people into a healthier lifestyle.
Absolutely. Wow, you said some very powerful things there. And, Sherrill and I often say, we're in our 20s.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we continue to be in our 20s. But for as long as I've been a healthcare professional, it's intuitive, but you can't replace, you can't take something away or encourage someone to take something away without having a replacement. That literally is so powerful to me. I'm going to use that on the second half of my birthday today. I'm using that today.
A realistic replacement. Remember that.
Yes, a realistic.
It has to be. We got to be honest now. If you don't like tofu, say you don't want to use tofu. What do you like? And if it don't work, let's talk about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. The other thing that you mentioned indirectly is that and we all can relate to this, we can have vegetables and we like vegetables, but oftentimes we cook the nutrition straight out the vegetables. Sweet potatoes that we make sweeter,
Right.
or, or cooking the greens down so much so that they are friable with not fry FRY, but FRI bowl with so much pig fat or turkey butt in them that, again, they're just not even vegetables anymore. So two very important points that you've made there. As we wrap up the show, I'd like you to speak to a couple things and leave us with points to ponder. I want you to highlight the importance of female representation in minority considerations and minority future in our culture, and also that's translatable to other cultures, so that we get care that is more meaningful and appropriate for us. What's the role of the woman in female representation going forward in healthcare? Each of you speak to that briefly.
Wow, all these wonderful questions. I immediately thought of intuition. So when you mentioned the role of women and the power of women being involved in the healthcare continuum. So I think both as uh, healthcare providers or healthcare givers, as well as moms, wives, sisters, aunts, both sides of the spectrum call us to be and to utilize this natural intuition that we do have as women. And I think that's why a lot of times we might pick up on things earlier, or have those reminders of going to see our doctors, or keep the family on schedule. A lot of times we make those decisions, which hospital to go to or which doctor. So I believe that the power of the woman in all of that in healthcare is just for us to be very intuitive to both our clients' needs and into our family's needs.
Thank you. Final point, Jessica.
I will say, I think it's important for us, women of color, Black women, African American, however you identify, to show up and be represented in spaces. But there's I want to add something to that. Typically, we are the ones that are pushing for us to show up. And that becomes very heavy if we think about it historically. All of the Angela Davis and the Dr. Joy DeGrues and the Harriet Tubmans, as was mentioned earlier, that is a very heavy feat to carry. So when we talk about representation, I really would like the Black men as well to push that representation too, so we can begin to push one another, so we can take some of the weight off our shoulders. So yes, I want us to be represented, but I want us to be supported through that representation. So it doesn't just feel like we're doing it alone.
Absolutely. Wow, this has been such a rich, rich show today. I want to thank each of you for contributing. This show has just been enormous in terms of the richness. I want to give a thank you to Tina Fernandez, who had to jump off. Certainly, thank you, Jessica. Don't forget and all of you, to leave us some information as to how we can connect with you on our rebroadcast. And also nurse boss Michelle Green Rhodes. We just love you and thank you for the participation. As we wrap up, we cannot forget our own woman in history, and that's Sherryl Cusseaux. We want to congratulate her as the first person of color nominated for the American Heart Association Woman of Impact distinction. The way heart disease affects our community, we need that representation to bring research and dollars and attention and ears to our community, because cardiovascular disease is the #1 killer of African Americans, and especially African American women. So that said, I want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of this show. Shout out to our Sherryl Jennings Cusseaux, as she is taking care of her own business today. This show is a wrap.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation. Bye.
Thank you. I appreciate you, ladies.